Hi, this is just a brief tutorial that will hopefully help you finish Unit 3, Section 4. So the first thing I would do is, again, read through this carefully. The worksheet displays two functions, f of x, which is the top one, and g of x, which is the bottom one. Functions, f of x is the basic function, and again, the basic function is that y equals x squared. And g of x is some sort of transform or composition of transformations that we applied to our basic functions. So it could be translations, dilations, reflections. So we're going to decide just from looking at the data, figure out the basic function. And so again, sometimes the basic function might be that y equals x squared if it looks quadratic, or it just might be that y equals x for linear. And then we're going to figure out what we did to it. So when we look at this first f of x, we notice that it was a negative 3 that became a positive 9. And the only way to go from negative 3 to positive 9 and a negative 1 to a positive 1 is to do a quadratic. So that's how we know which one to pick over here. Then you choose your equation. Since you picked quadratic, that's x squared. And then you know that all x squareds look like parabolas. And so now you have to decide, we're trying to figure out what the transformation was here. We know, and again, if I push this button right here, we know it's an x squared, but what did we do to x squared? So I like to look back at like the 0 or the negative 3, and so 0, it all of a sudden went down to negative 9. And negative 3 went from 9 down to 0. So it looks like we're translating this graph and we're shifting something down. But the other thing you have to take note of is, how did these x values change? Originally it was a negative 3 and then it changed to a negative 6. Originally it was a negative 1 and it changed to a negative 4. And so how did we move those numbers? And I'm thinking, well, subtract 3, subtract 3, subtract 3. So what that's telling me is I'm doing a transformation. So it highlights here first, and it says if you multiply 9, so now they're talking about 9 to a negative 9. If you multiply 1 by negative 1, what sort of transformation will that result? So they're saying, actually, I was looking at the x's. They're telling me the hint is to look at the y's, what's happening, and I'm seeing it go from a positive to a negative. And so how do we get that to change, but just put a negative sign in front of it? And you push enter, and then you have to figure out, well, what's happening to my graph? And what's happening to my graph is if I'm changing the y values from positive to negative, I'm getting a reflection. So then the question they're asking us is this original function, is that all that happened? Did all we do was change 9 to negative 9, or do we do something else? And we would say, no, we did something else. Okay, so then, likewise, if you subtract 3 from negative 3, you get negative 6. So they're telling us our next transformation. So first they looked at the y's, and they asked that transformation. Now they're looking at our x's, and we're recognizing that those are changing. And we know that we change our x's by putting it in parentheses. And if we're going to subtract 3, again, negative 3 to negative 6, that's actually subtracting a negative, which makes it a plus. And we know that that is a translation. Again, subtracting 3 would shift it to the left. It asks us by how many units. Well, we already saw that it was 3. And now the question is, does it match what our original numbers were? If you kind of look at what's down here, so we first took our basic function, we reflected it, we translated it. They're just repeating what happened in terms of what the picture is on the graph. And now I have to say, okay, if this is my final answer, yes or no, when I plug in this negative 6 plus 3 is negative 3 squared is 9, negative, I get out negative 9 and I say yes. So again, all you're doing is you're going through the problems and you're deciding the translations, and they'll ask you first to figure out your translation in terms of a reflection, possibly, or maybe it's going to be a shift up or down. Then look at your transformation and think about your shifting left and right, and then they're always going to ask you yes or no to see if it matches. So try some of those ideas, And if you still have questions, please come see me during resource. Thanks.